As we get older, many of us expect that a steady pension, a bit of savings, or the loving support of our children will give us comfort and security in our golden years. But for some, life doesn't turn out that way. This is the story of Aunt Fong, a woman who faced old age with neither a pension nor any significant savings, and whose only child grew distant just when she needed family most. Construction site compensation and acceptance was how her struggle began, with her husband's sudden death and a modest payout from his employer, an amount that seemed like a fortune, but was never enough to erase her worries about the future. Left alone in a quiet rural village, Aunt Fong quickly learned that family financial struggles after husband's death would define her daily reality. She looked to her son with hope, believing he would be the pillar she could lean on. Yet as the years passed and the hardships deepened, she found herself standing at a crossroads, forced to question where true security comes from, and whether a mother's love and sacrifice would ever be returned. This is her journey, and it may remind you of stories you've heard or lived yourself. If you are not subscribed, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. The day Aunt Fong lost her husband was the day the world as she knew it began to crumble. She had spent most of her life in a quiet rural village, never expecting wealth, but always counting on the steady rhythm of her husband's presence and hard work. He labored for years on dusty construction sites, coming home tired but proud, his wages keeping their small family afloat. One day, though, he simply didn't come home. The news came quickly and coldly, a tragic accident at the job site, no warning, no chance to say goodbye. In the days that followed, Aunt Fong's grief was heavy, but she didn't have the luxury to mourn as long as she wanted. The reality of life's demands set in almost immediately. There were bills to pay, a home to maintain, and a son just on the brink of adulthood, still figuring out his place in the world. As she faced these uncertainties, she was summoned by the construction site boss to discuss compensation. Construction site compensation and acceptance became the first hurdle in what would be a long and lonely journey. Sitting in a small, cramped office across from the boss, Aunt Fong felt the full weight of her new responsibilities. The boss looked tired, his face drawn from years of running a business on the edge of profit and loss. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a check for 300,000 yuan, along with a simple explanation. "This is all I can offer," he said, almost apologetically. "If you want more, I have nothing left. You can take this now and sign the agreement, or take your chances in court. But I can't promise anything if you sue." For Aunt Fong, it wasn't a choice. She knew the boss struggled to pay wages on time even before her husband died. She had seen the frustration in her husband's eyes during those months when the paycheck came late, or not at all. There was no secret stash of money, no insurance waiting to step in. If she refused, she might walk away with nothing. Swallowing her pride and pain, she accepted the compensation, signing the paperwork with trembling hands. The money felt heavy, as if it carried the very spirit of her late husband. At first, the sum seemed like a lifeline, enough, perhaps, to cover her son's needs, pay for emergencies, and maybe even offer a sense of security. But the truth, she soon discovered, was much less comforting. 300,000 yuan was not a fortune, not when stretched over the years ahead. It was just enough to make her worry about how quickly it might disappear. Every expense became a calculation, every purchase weighed against the uncertain future. Family financial struggles after husband's death became her daily reality. The house felt emptier than ever, not just from grief, but from the absence of laughter, routine, and partnership. Her husband's presence had always been a quiet force, helping with the heavy lifting around the farm, fixing things that broke, sharing the burden of decisions big and small. Now, all those responsibilities fell to Aunt Fong alone. Her son, just 18, was too young to understand the full magnitude of what had happened. He saw his mother's tired face and the way she stared into space, her thoughts 1,000 miles away. The boy offered to leave for the city to find work, wanting to ease her worries, but Aunt Fong could see that he was just as lost and frightened as she was. He had just failed his college entrance exams, and though she tried to reassure him, she worried about what kind of future awaited a young man with few skills and no direction. Even daily life became a series of small sacrifices. Aunt Fong stopped buying little treats at the market, no longer indulging in the small pleasures she used to enjoy. She stretched her resources as far as they would go, mending clothes instead of replacing them, growing as much food as she could in her garden, and rationing every yuan. In the quiet hours of the evening, she sometimes held the check in her hands and wondered how long it would last. There was no one else to turn to. Neighbors offered sympathy, but they had their worries and struggles. In the countryside, everyone knew that hardship was a part of life. There was little room for pity or handouts. Aunt Fong's dignity would never allow her to ask for help anyway. She became even more determined to make every penny count. As the months passed, she found herself thinking constantly about the future. Her son grew more independent, eager to contribute but still unsure of his place in the world. Aunt Fong kept her concerns to herself, not wanting to burden him with her fears. She held on to the compensation money as tightly as she could, knowing it was the only safety net she had. But no matter how careful she was, unexpected expenses cropped up. Repairs around the house, health scares, the rising cost of necessities, all of these chipped away at her small reserve. The anxiety became a constant presence, gnawing at her peace of mind. She knew she couldn't afford to be careless. There would be no pension arriving every month, no government safety net to catch her if she fell. Sometimes she thought back to her early days of marriage, when life was simpler and hope came easier. Back then, she and her husband had dreamed of watching their son grow up, perhaps even seeing grandchildren play in the yard. Those dreams seemed impossibly distant now. The laughter that once filled the house had faded into silence, replaced by the ticking of the clock and the endless calculations about how to make her money last. Despite everything, Aunt Fong refused to give in to despair. She pushed herself to work harder, rising before dawn to tend to the small plot of land behind her house. Every chicken she raised, every egg she sold, felt like a tiny act of defiance, a way to prove to herself that she could still stand on her own 2 feet. Even as the weight of loss pressed down on her, she found moments of strength in simple routines. Through it all, she tried to shield her son from the worst of her worries. She encouraged him to chase after his dreams, even if it meant he would eventually leave her behind. The thought of being truly alone frightened her, but she knew that a mother's love meant sacrificing her comfort for the sake of her child. When the evenings grew long and lonely, Aunt Fong would sometimes sit by the window and look out at the fields, remembering the life she had built and the man she had lost. She told herself that she had no choice but to keep moving forward. If she stopped, even for a moment, the weight of her grief and fear might overwhelm her. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. And so, Aunt Fong's journey through construction site compensation and acceptance and family financial struggles after husband's death was not just about surviving hardship, but about learning to find strength in places she never expected. The loss of her husband forced her to reckon with a new reality, one where she alone was responsible for her future. Yet, in the face of heartbreak and uncertainty, she clung to the hope that she could create a life of dignity and independence, even in a world that seemed intent on testing her resilience at every turn. After her husband's passing, the rhythm of Aunt Fong's days changed, but the world did not stop for her sorrow. She still had her son, the last thread of family, and the last light of hope in her otherwise uncertain life. He was 18, still young, but the hardships of life had already left their mark on his expression. He had taken the college entrance exams that year, and like so many others in the village, had hoped for a letter that would open doors to a better future. But the results arrived, and hope quickly gave way to disappointment. He hadn't scored well enough, not even for a modest community college. The silence that followed was heavy, hanging over both mother and son as they tried to look past the reality that a university education, once considered the surest path out of poverty, was now out of reach. Aunt Fong understood that the future would not wait for them to grieve or wallow. She watched her son wrestle with his feelings of failure, his pride bruised but his spirit not yet broken. There was talk in the village about son's decision to work in the city. Some mothers would have insisted their child stay close, to help with the land or to try school again. But Aunt Fong saw that her son needed a new direction, a way to regain his confidence and contribute to their survival. She could not give him a diploma, but she could give him her blessing. So, after many quiet conversations under the dim lamp in their small kitchen, her son made up his mind. He would leave for the city, like so many other young men from the countryside, and try to make a living there. It was a difficult decision for Aunt Fong to accept, but she did not let her tears show. Instead, she packed his bag carefully, folding each shirt and pair of trousers as if she were wrapping a prayer inside. Before he left, she handed him a thick envelope. Inside, the equivalent of 10,000 yuan, most of it from the money she had been guarding so carefully since her husband's death. This was her initial financial support and encouragement, all she could give to help him begin anew. She pressed the envelope into his hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Use this only if you truly need it," she said, her eyes shining with a mixture of worry and hope. "Don't waste it. Times ahead will be hard, and you must be strong." Her son nodded, shoulders squared with resolve, and promised that he would not let her down. As the day of departure approached, Aunt Fong's house was filled with a strange blend of anticipation and sadness. The neighbors came by to offer advice and wish him luck. Some recounted stories of relatives who had found success in the city, while others spoke in hushed tones about those who had returned home defeated. But Aunt Fong refused to let fear rule her heart. She hugged her son tightly at the bus stop, whispering prayers for his safety, and watched as he disappeared into the flow of city-bound travelers. Life in the city was not easy for a young man with little education and few connections. Aunt Fong worried constantly, waiting for his calls, listening for any hint of discouragement in his voice. But her son surprised her. Within weeks, he found a job as a car mechanic, a humble position, but honest work. He called home with news that he was earning 3,000 yuan a month, and that if he mastered his skills, his salary could soon double. He spoke with a new confidence, describing the busy streets, the endless noise, and the challenge of learning something new every day. Aunt Fong felt a flicker of pride. Perhaps things would get better, after all. The phone calls became a lifeline between mother and son. He shared stories about the city, the tall buildings, the crowded buses, the kindness of his co-workers who showed him the ropes. Sometimes, he confessed how lonely it could be, how the city lights didn't quite erase the shadows of homesickness. Aunt Fong listened patiently, always ending the call with words of encouragement and advice. She reminded him that every step forward was a victory, no matter how small. Back in the countryside, Aunt Fong found new purpose in her daily routine. She poured her energy into the little farm, tending to the chickens and ducks, making sure that there was always something she could send to her son if he needed extra support. Each egg she collected, each vegetable she picked, felt like a tiny contribution to his future. She wanted nothing more than to see him succeed, to know that her sacrifices were not in vain. As the months passed, her son's confidence grew. He began to talk about his dreams. Maybe, someday, owning a house in the city so he wouldn't have to pay rent forever. Aunt Fong listened to his ambitions with a cautious heart. She knew how quickly hope could be dashed, but she wanted to believe that things would work out. She encouraged him to learn everything he could, to be patient, and to build a foundation for a better life. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Aunt Fong allowed herself to imagine a different future, a time when her son might invite her to join him in the city, when their lives would no longer be defined by struggle and distance. She did not dare to dream too boldly, but she let those hopes warm her heart in the darkness. Through all the challenges, Aunt Fong remained steadfast. The bond between mother and son was stretched by distance and difficulty, but it was never broken. Her initial financial support and encouragement had not just been about money, it was about faith. She believed in her son, even when the world seemed to doubt him. She gave him the best start she could, and in doing so, gave herself the strength to carry on. As her son learned new skills and gained new friends, Aunt Fong continued to wait and pray. Every milestone he reached, every pay raise, every lesson mastered, was a small victory for them both. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Aunt Fong allowed herself to hope. And so, with a mother's love and a son's determination, they faced the unknown together, separated by miles but forever connected by their shared resilience and unwavering hope. The seasons shifted quietly as Aunt Fong's son began to build a life in the city, far from the fields and slow rhythms of their rural home. Each phone call from him brought new stories. Stories of learning, challenges, and growing up. He was working hard as a mechanic, saving what he could, but the city, with its endless expenses and constant temptations, made saving money a daunting task. Still, hope flickered in both their hearts that his fortunes would soon improve. One evening, her son called with an excitement that was impossible to hide. After the usual greetings, he cleared his throat and brought up a topic that would change the course of their lives: request for house purchase. He explained that the rent for his modest apartment was swallowing nearly all of his monthly earnings. "Mom, every month I pay the landlord, and I have nothing left over," he confessed, frustration clear in his voice. "If I keep renting, all my hard work will be for nothing. Instead of throwing money away on rent, I could put it toward something that's truly mine." He paused, as if waiting for her approval. Then, gently, he asked for her help. "I've been thinking, if you could give me the rest of Dad's compensation money, I could use it as a down payment on a place of my own. I could finally start building a real future." His words were hopeful, earnest, and heavy with expectation. The request left Aunt Fong silent for a long moment. She remembered how hard it had been to accept that money in the first place, signing those papers after her husband's tragic death. It wasn't just money, it was all she had left to feel safe, her only lifeline in case things went wrong. The thought of parting with it made her heart race. She thought about her future, about growing old alone, without a pension and a steady income. Financial concerns of mother kept her awake that night, replaying her son's words over and over. She didn't sleep much. Instead, she sat by her small kitchen table, staring at the dim glow of the lamp. The memory of her husband lingered in every shadow, and she wondered what advice he would have given. Should she keep the money close, as a shield against uncertainty? Or should she trust her son's dreams, giving him the chance she never had? The next day, her son called again, his voice hopeful but tinged with anxiety. "Mom, I know you're worried. But I promise, once I get settled, I'll take care of you. I'll bring you to the city so you don't have to be alone anymore. Please, just help me this once." In that moment, Aunt Fong felt the full weight of motherhood, the hope, the fear, and the endless willingness to sacrifice for a child's happiness. After much soul-searching, she made her decision. With a trembling hand, she transferred the remaining 290,000 yuan to her son's bank account. She said nothing about her fears. Instead, she simply wished him luck and asked him to be careful. Her son was overjoyed, immediately diving into the process of finding an apartment. It wasn't easy, but eventually, he found a small, unfinished unit, a place he could call his own. It wasn't glamorous or modern, but it was a start. Loan and house purchase became the new reality for their family. Her son had to take out a sizable loan to cover the remaining cost, but he assured his mother that, with hard work, he could pay it off in a few years. There was no money left for decorating or furnishing the apartment, so he moved in as it was: bare walls, a simple mattress on the floor, and a leaky faucet that needed fixing. Yet, for him, it was a symbol of independence, proof that he could carve out his place in the world. For Aunt Fong, however, the apartment was a bittersweet victory. She was proud of her son, but the emptiness in her own pockets was now very real. Still, Aunt Fong did what mothers do best. She found ways to help, even from a distance. She worked harder on her small farm, raising extra chickens and ducks, and tending a patch of vegetables she could sell for a little profit. At the end of the year, she gathered what she earned and sent it to her son, urging him to use it for his new home, even if it was just for a pot, a blanket, or a light bulb to brighten a lonely night. As the years rolled by, her son kept chasing his dreams, always just one step behind where he wanted to be. The apartment remained unfinished, and the loan weighed heavily on him. Sometimes, he called to vent his frustrations. Other times, to thank her for her help. Aunt Fong listened patiently, offering encouragement and quiet advice. The city was full of challenges, she knew, and every day brought new obstacles to overcome. Aunt Fong often wondered if she had made the right decision. Without that nest egg, her future felt uncertain. No pension, no savings, and no property to her name. Still, she found comfort in her son's determination, hoping that, in time, he would find the stability he longed for. She reminded herself that life was never predictable, and that sometimes all a mother could do was trust that her love and sacrifices would one day be repaid. Not in money, but in kindness and gratitude. Her son's journey became a lesson in resilience for them both. The apartment stood as a testament to their shared hope and hard work, even if it wasn't perfect. Aunt Fong, now living with a little less security, held her head high. She had given her son the best she could, the freedom to dream, the foundation for a future, and the silent, steady support that only a mother can provide. Through each twist and turn, Aunt Fong learned that love often means letting go, even when it hurts. She held on to hope, believing that her sacrifices would not be forgotten, and that, somehow, she and her son would both find a way forward, no matter how uncertain the path might seem. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The days turned into months as Aunt Fong watched the seasons shift outside her window, each sunrise bringing another round of work and quiet longing. Her son's new apartment in the city was a source of pride, but it was also a constant reminder of how much was still missing from their lives. The place was empty, bare walls, unfinished floors, and a sense of coldness that not even her most optimistic wishes could quite dispel. She wanted so much for her son to feel at home, for his life to be filled with warmth and comfort, not just concrete and dreams deferred. Earning extra money for house decoration. Determined to help, Aunt Fong did what she'd always done. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. With almost nothing left from her husband's compensation, she had to start from scratch. Every morning, she was up before dawn, feeding chickens and ducks, tending her little vegetable garden, and looking after 2 pigs she hoped would fetch a decent price at the end of the year. It was back-breaking work, but she found purpose in each task. Every egg she gathered and every bushel of vegetables she carried to the village market brought her a step closer to her goal, sending money to her son for his house. Her hands grew rough and calloused, her back ached at the end of each long day, but she pressed on. This was her way of helping him build a life worth living, even if she couldn't be there beside him. When the time came, Aunt Fong sold her chickens, ducks, and pigs, counting every hard-earned yuan. She carefully tucked the money away, saving it for her son's future. During the new year, when he made the long journey back home, she placed the money in his hands, her voice soft but full of hope. "Use this to help finish your apartment," she urged. "You shouldn't have to live in a place that doesn't feel like home." Her son accepted the money, his eyes shining with a complicated mix of gratitude and embarrassment. High decoration costs. Yet, no matter how hard Aunt Fong worked or how much she saved, the costs of making a home in the city were staggering. Her son had priced the cost of decorating the apartment at nearly 150,000 yuan, a sum that seemed almost impossible to gather for a small-town family scraping by on little more than hope and hard work. The number haunted Aunt Fong's thoughts. she worried aloud to her son. "We don't have the kind of luck city folks do. We just can't afford that kind of luxury." But her son was stubborn. He insisted that he deserved a nice home and that he'd find a way to make it happen, no matter how long it took. Aunt Fong watched as his determination hardened, pride and longing etched deep in his voice. There were days when she felt that their dreams might be too big for their circumstances, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him to stop reaching. The months slipped by, each one marked by more sacrifices. Aunt Fong pinched every penny, cut corners wherever she could, and continued sending what little she earned to her son. Despite her best efforts, the goal felt farther away with each passing day. She wondered if all their hard work would ever pay off. Son's girlfriend and financial support promise. Then, just as the hope of finishing the apartment seemed to be slipping from their grasp, her son returned home one New Year's holiday with surprising news. He brought a girl with him, a city girl, elegant and polished in a way that set her apart from the village crowd. The girl was polite, but she looked at Aunt Fong with barely concealed disdain, her manner cool and distant. It was clear that she came from a world of greater privilege, a world where worries about money and unfinished homes were mere inconveniences, not life-defining struggles. Her son, however, was brimming with pride. He explained that his girlfriend's family was well off and that, if they married, her parents would pay for the apartment's full renovation. For them, 150,000 yuan was nothing, a small gift for their daughter's happiness. Aunt Fong wanted desperately to believe it, though she felt a flicker of doubt. She'd lived long enough to know that nothing in life was guaranteed, especially when it came to promises made by strangers. Still, her son was convinced that this was the answer to all their problems, and Aunt Fong didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm. So she stayed quiet, watching from the sidelines as her son's dreams seemed, for the first time, within reach. The apartment was finally decorated, filled with furniture and colors that Aunt Fong had never dared to imagine. For her son, this was the start of a new life, one she'd worked and sacrificed for, even if it meant being left behind. Wedding day disrespect. The wedding was held in the city, a grand affair with music, laughter, and the gentle clink of glasses raised in celebration. Aunt Fong attended, her heart full but her hands trembling. She was the mother of the groom, but in the eyes of many, she was just a poor countrywoman, an outsider who didn't quite belong. She was placed at a table far from the action, out of sight and mind, as if her years of sacrifice and love were invisible to everyone but herself. From her lonely corner, she watched as her son celebrated his new life, surrounded by people who knew little of the struggles that had brought him there. The feeling of being overlooked cut deeper than she expected. Aunt Fong tried to smile, to swallow the pain and disappointment that rose in her throat, but it was hard. Her son noticed, and in a rare quiet moment, tried to comfort her. "Mom, just endure it for now," he whispered. "One day, I'll make you proud." His words were meant to soothe, but they only deepened the ache inside her. For Aunt Fong, the day felt less like a celebration and more like a lesson in letting go. Returning home after the wedding, Aunt Fong carried with her a complicated mix of pride and sorrow. She was grateful that her son's dreams were coming true, yet she couldn't ignore how much she had been forced to give up along the way. Not just money, but her place in his new world. Even so, she resolved to keep moving forward, holding on to the hope that, in time, her sacrifices would be recognized, not with grand gestures, but with quiet, enduring love. The glow of her son's wedding faded quickly, leaving Aunt Fong with a hollow ache she could not easily explain. She returned to her quiet country home, carrying the bittersweet memory of a day that should have brought her joy but instead left her feeling like a stranger in her own family's story. The city apartment, the beautiful decorations, the daughter-in-law with her polished manners. All of it belonged to a new chapter in her son's life, one that seemed to have little room for her. Neglect and reduced communication. In the months that followed, the distance between Aunt Fong and her son only seemed to grow. The phone, once a lifeline of encouragement and shared dreams, became strangely silent. At first, Aunt Fong told herself not to worry. She reasoned that her son was simply busy with work, settling into his new marriage, building the future he had always hoped for. She waited patiently, watching the seasons pass outside her window, expecting the calls to come. But weeks would slip by without even a simple hello. She dialed his number from time to time, just to hear his voice, but often the call would ring and ring, then go unanswered. When he did pick up, their conversations were hurried and shallow, filled with polite words but none of the warmth she remembered. Sometimes she thought of all those years she had sacrificed for him. The hard work, the sleepless nights, the lonely days spent working the land to make his dreams possible. She wondered if he remembered, or if those memories had been swept away by the tides of city life. Aunt Fong's heart grew heavier with each unanswered call, each brief message that felt more like an obligation than a conversation between mother and son. Exclusion from family events. As time wore on, Aunt Fong began to realize just how much she was being left behind. One day, she heard from a neighbor that her daughter-in-law had given birth to a baby girl. The news, so joyous and momentous, had not reached Aunt Fong's ears through her own family, but through whispers in the village. She sat in stunned silence, struggling to process what it meant to be excluded from such an important event in her own family's life. There was no phone call from her son, no invitation to see her new grandchild. The pain of being shut out stung deeper than any hardship she had endured in her life. For days, she replayed the scene in her mind, her granddaughter taking her first breath in a city hospital, her son beaming with pride, her daughter-in-law perhaps surrounded by her parents and relatives. Aunt Fong, meanwhile, sat miles away, clutching her phone, wondering if she would ever be welcomed into this new family circle. The sense of isolation was profound, a cold emptiness that settled into her bones. It wasn't just about missing a milestone, it was about losing her place in the lives of those she loved most. Daughter-in-law's harsh attitude. Determined to at least hear her son's voice and offer her congratulations, Aunt Fong mustered her courage and dialed his number once again. This time, the phone was answered, but not by her son. Instead, it was her daughter-in-law on the line, her voice as cold and sharp as the winter wind. She informed Aunt Fong, without a trace of warmth, that her son was too busy to talk. "Don't call so much," she said bluntly. "He has his own life now, and he can't be bothered with your constant interruptions." The words cut deep. Aunt Fong tried to explain that she just wanted to see her granddaughter, to share in the joy of her growing family, but her daughter-in-law's tone grew even more impatient. "If you want to help, you should come to the city and take care of the baby. Otherwise, please don't call unless it's truly important." The implication was clear. Aunt Fong's place in this family was conditional, dependent not on love or kinship, but on her usefulness as a caregiver. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. After the call ended, Aunt Fong sat for a long time in silence, struggling to contain her anger and sorrow. She felt humiliated, reduced from the proud mother who had given everything for her child to an outsider who was barely tolerated. The realization was hard to accept, that the people she had loved the most could turn away so easily, blinded by the demands and distractions of their own new life. But Aunt Fong, though heartbroken, was not defeated. The years had taught her resilience, and now, faced with rejection from those she held most dear, she found a new resolve stirring within her. She would not beg for affection or chase after people who saw her as a burden. Her dignity, hard-won through a lifetime of sacrifice and struggle, was worth more than empty promises or grudging invitations. She began to pull back, little by little, reclaiming her sense of self-worth. She stopped waiting by the phone, stopped rearranging her days in hopes of a visit that never came. Instead, she poured her energy into the routines that had always brought her comfort. Her animals, her garden, the simple pleasures of each new day. Though she mourned the loss of her place in her son's life, she discovered that she could still find peace in the life she built for herself. As the seasons continued to turn, Aunt Fong accepted the hard truth that love sometimes means letting go. not just of people, but of expectations. She would carry the memories of her sacrifices, her love, and her hopes, but she would no longer let them hold her back from living her own life with grace and dignity. In the quiet moments, she whispered blessings for her son and his new family, hoping that one day they might understand the depth of a mother's love, a love that endures even when it is forgotten, unrecognized, or cast aside. After months of silence, cold shoulders, and painful rejection, Aunt Fong came to a difficult but clear realization. She could no longer rely on her son or daughter-in-law for support. The promises of care and companionship that had once kept her hopes alive had faded into empty words. It was a hard truth to face, but it sparked a fire inside her, a determination to take control of her own life and secure her future on her terms. This was her decision to stop relying on children. Aunt Fong knew that waiting for kindness or help from her family was only prolonging her loneliness and insecurity. She understood that to live with dignity, she had to stand on her own 2 feet. With a steady resolve, she began planning a change that would give her independence and peace of mind. The house in the countryside, the place filled with memories of better days, had to go. Though the land provided food and familiarity, it no longer represented safety or comfort. It was time to let it go. Selling the countryside home was both a practical and emotional decision. The money would allow her to buy a small apartment in the city, a place closer to modern conveniences and medical facilities, something far more suited to her needs as she grew older. Though the apartment would be modest and much smaller than the house she was leaving behind, it symbolized freedom from dependence and vulnerability. Aunt Fong envisioned a quiet, manageable life in her new home, one where she could maintain control over her daily routine and not feel like a burden to anyone. With the sale finalized, Aunt Fong moved into her compact city apartment, embracing the simplicity and security it offered. But she knew that owning a home was only part of the equation. To truly be independent, she needed a steady income, no matter how modest. Her savings were limited, and with no pension to fall back on, she had to find work. Though she was now in her 60s, Aunt Fong refused to let age define her. She took on a job as a janitor in a local office building, a role that was physically manageable and didn't require formal education but still provided a reliable paycheck. This was the beginning of her new chapter, starting work as a janitor. Each morning, she rose early to clean the floors, empty trash bins, and tidy the office spaces. It was honest, straightforward work, and she found comfort in the routine. The job gave her a sense of purpose and, most importantly, the ability to support herself without depending on anyone else. For Aunt Fong, this independence was priceless. She no longer feared the uncertainty of her future or the indifference of family members. Living alone in her city apartment, working her janitor job, Aunt Fong discovered a renewed sense of dignity and peace. She proved to herself that even in the face of neglect and hardship, strength and self-reliance could shine through. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to stand alone and live on our terms. Life taught Aunt Fong many hard lessons, but the most important one was this. In the end, the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. She faced heartbreak, neglect, and loneliness, yet she found the strength to rebuild her life on her terms. No pension, no savings, no family support, just her courage and determination. Moving to the city, starting a new job, and living independently wasn't easy, but it gave her peace of mind and a sense of dignity she had never known before. Her story reminds us all that aging doesn't have to mean giving up control or feeling helpless. It's a powerful message for anyone facing similar challenges. Your value isn't defined by others' choices or actions. You have the power to create a life of comfort, respect, and independence, no matter your circumstances. If Aunt Fong's journey touched your heart or inspired you, please let us know in the comments. Share your thoughts, your own experiences, or any advice you have for others navigating tough family situations or financial struggles in their later years. Your voice matters, and together we can build a community of support and encouragement. Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful or moving, And subscribe to our channel for more stories and advice tailored to seniors seeking strength and independence. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Remember, no matter what life throws your way, you are not alone. And with determination and resilience, you can live your best life at any age. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.